All right, so apparently we're live, which is good to hear. Let me just see whether we've got the chat sort of fixed though, because I'm kind of keen that we're able to talk to everyone. Here we go, we can do that. Excellent stuff. Okay, folks, welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm very excited to be hosting this conversation, primarily because I really think it's important, but also because I think we're actually doing something positive in terms of maturing the conversation of something which I think is very significant, the candidate use of of AI, and how that actually has an impact on how we design recruitment processes. Now, if you are a recruiter and you've posted an advert or you've done anything with regards to talent attraction over the past 12 months, you've probably already seen instances where you might suspect AI assistance in the job application process. Now, what we want to do here is essentially understand sort of where we're at in terms of the adoption of artificial intelligence, how candidates are using it, what their attitude is, and what that also means for us in terms of how we adapt to it. Our friends at Arctic Shores, which are hosting this webinar, have done some amazing research. I highly recommend you download not only their report, which they did about, I think, 6 months or so ago, on, I think, something like 2,000 or so Gen Z job seekers, how they were using generative AI, but also their latest report, which is the ultimate guide for recruiters on how we meant to behave with this circumstance. So folks, we're live on LinkedIn, so I just want to check. Hopefully you've heard that preamble. Let me know in the comments whether the audio and visual is okay. You should see 4 people on screen already. And put a comment or question or any interactivity into that LinkedIn event. And we've got a marketing team at Arctic Shore is going to fetch that over to us and we'll be able to interact from there. Anyway, let's do some quick intros. Let's go to you, Robert, first. Who are you? What it is you do?
Thank you, Hung. So CEO and co-founder of Arctic Shores, very excited to be here, and also excited that this is our 10th year anniversary. So ever since I set out to try and uncover potential and help organizations see more in people, it's been quite a journey to get here, and a very exciting time, I think, for the psychometric industry, because Gen AI is really sort of turning everything upside down. So thank you for hosting this, and excited to be alongside Claudia and Dan.
Great stuff. Great to have you on this, and thanks for sorting it out, Robert. Let's go to Claudia. Claudia, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi there. Yes, so I'm Claudia Natchins. I head up the Assessment and Selection Advisory team at AMS. I work in the Innovation and Advisory function, and we're a team of occupational psychologists. I'm a chartered psychologist who advise clients on approaches to assessment and selection, and we do that via our partners, one of which is Arctic Shores. And we really kind of look at leveraging technology. We work very closely with our tech advisory colleagues and look at end-to-end processes for assessment and selection. So obviously AI is of huge impact on us at the moment, and very much a hot topic of conversation continuously. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Welcome, Claudia. And Dan, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hello, Hung. Yes, no problem. So Dan from Group GTI. I've been here for 8 months and previously spent the last decade or so across the early careers space within large tech consultancies, apprenticeship learning providers, and also now more recently with Group GTI to work in the creative solutions team. So it spans across a lot of our sales, product marketing teams, and also a lot of our external ventures as well. So great to be here and join the conversation.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, let's just set the scene. Robert, why don't we go straight to some of the information that Arctic Shores have put together? It'd be nice to show the audience where we are currently standing on this as we kick off the conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Hung. So I've got a few slides for everybody here just to set the scene and fuel the thoughts for debate on this, because there are lots of different perspectives on it. But let's just start off about the whole situation of the AI-enabled candidate and what that means for organizations. And we've seen loads of coverage across the different media, whether BBC, we've got tech interviewers now saying that they can't tell the difference between an AI-enabled candidate and a real one. You've got TikTok that's awash with tips and hints and videos on how you can ace an interview. You have got lots of people predicting, the end of the traditional recruitment process. So there's lots of different perspectives on that, and what we want to get out of today is just trying to understand what's truth, what's fiction, what's hype, and what's reality on this. But what we do know is reality on this is that recruiters are feeling the pain. We're hearing it a lot from the Arctic Shores customers on this one. And recently, actually, one of our customers was saying that they got 80 identical applications through their recruitment process. So if we think this is something that's just minor and happening in the background, we're not looking out to the reality on it. I think one of the things that's interesting in part of this debate, this is one of your polls hung on this one, is are we giving any guidance to people on this? So we know it's big, we know it's important, but what are we saying to people as either advisors or as companies, as recruiters, on how you can use generative AI in job applications? I was staggered here to see 51% say they don't give any guidance and have no plan to give guidance on this absolutely crucial area. And I know both Claudia and Dan have perspectives on this, and that will be part of the interesting discussion ahead. But we can see here from some of the comments on this poll, every time you put something out there, there's always a good discussion from people on there with so many different perspectives as to what to do. And we do need some clarity about how we approach this. So it's just a few of them. We've summarized the three ways that I think there are three types of camps for organizations at the moment. There are those that have banned Gen AI, and here's, we give them some of the pros and cons around that. There are those that are just staying neutral and just saying, actually, we'll not particularly give any comment on it, and we'll wait for candidates to work it out. And then there are those that are embracing and guiding. And part of the debate today will be, looking at some of the merits of each one of those positions. What we also have to consider is that the AI-enabled candidate now has a tool, like a calculator, that will enable them to approach the recruitment process. And that means we need to understand how that's going to either enhance or undermine the traditional way that we've been trying to understand the differences between candidates. Here's just a quick summary from some research we did last year, based on some research that we did with UCL. It's open research, so we've put how we did this out there, and for anybody to sort of peer review. I know different people have different perspectives on this. Claudia and AMS have also put out an excellent piece of research as well, taking a slightly different perspective on this. SOVA have also done some research on this, but we need to understand, we need to look at and debate what the implication of the AI-enabled candidate was going to be, and with Gen AI changing so quickly, the understanding what it means for a candidate to have a tool like this and what it means for our process is going to be super important. There are a couple of key stats that I just want to leave people with on this as to why we're thinking as to whether we do anything or don't do anything around this. There are lots of people who are using Gen AI as part of either in education or in their applications. Here was some interesting stuff that we found from our research earlier that Hung alluded to. higher proportions of people from like Black heritage groups, neurodiverse groups are using generative AI to level the playing field. So to simply say that you can't use generative AI in the application process has bigger implications for those groups that are seeing generative AI as an important tool to level the playing field for them. But like all these things, there's a twist. You've got ChatGPT-4, which is significantly better in terms of the way that it can help you and the responses that it gives you. Significantly better than ChatGPT 3.5, but ChatGPT-4 is behind a paywall. So suddenly now we have social mobility considerations on this. Are we going to start seeing private schools giving classes and lessons on how you can become a super prompt engineer, and then giving access to a paid version that once again gives a group an advantage over another group? So these are all important things that we have to be considering when we're looking at our recruitment processes and the guidance that we give. And as a final piece, we've done some work, some great work from the marketing team at Arctic Shores on how you can provide some templates and some thoughts on what you should be putting on your career sites on this. Here's a QR code for those that want to get access to the guide. I know, Hung, you kindly put it in a LinkedIn post earlier this week, and we can certainly provide it to anybody after this webinar. So that hopefully tees up some background and context. And over to you, Hung, to get the debate going.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And by the way, folks, if you didn't get the chance to download these two, the report and the guide, you really should do that. I mean, there's going to be other companies that are producing these types of bits of research, but grab what you can from it, because it's just going to be useful education. But also, if you need to have a conversation internally about any changes you might make, tools like this are going to help you support that argument. So, okay, let's just open the question to the panelists. What is your personal position on how companies should respond to candidate use of Gen AI? I mean, if we could use the formula that was presented by Robert there with the the negative, let's not, clear signal, don't do it, deter candidates from doing so. The neutral position of, laissez-faire it, probably is what most companies are doing right now, which is, we don't know what to do. Maybe we shouldn't do anything. We're just business as usual. Or do we kind of embrace it and actually realize, okay, we change it, but we have to guide the usage rather than have a completely freedom of action from the candidate? Any thoughts on that? I'll throw it open to anybody to make an early comment.
Well, I'll kick off just a quick early comment on this one. One for me is about transparency on this. And I think one of the things that candidates want when they're looking to apply to different organizations is that they just want to know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable in how they might apply for a role. And I just leave one quote that rings in my ear from Sarah Atkinson, who's Chief Executive of the Social Mobility Foundation. And she says the biggest question she always gets from the people that she's trying to help is just to know exactly what is expected of candidates when they apply for a role. And if we're not clear about it, then they just don't know. Is it acceptable? Is it not acceptable? Am I going to be marked down for using AI, or is there some sort of secret thing that's going on? And I've heard plenty of stories of where people say, oh, I've seen somebody use AI, it's so obvious, and I've immediately screened them out. Okay, well, what happens if they were dyslexic or dyspraxic and they were using AI to help them with their spelling and their grammar on that? We've just excluded somebody for entirely the wrong reasons. So I think transparency is actually in the candidate industry, candidate interests on this.
Yeah, it's a very compelling point, isn't it? Just telling people what the position is rather than have the candidates assume in this ambiguous space, because you can imagine situations where candidates will be thinking, if I don't use generative AI, it's going to penalize me because obviously I'm competing against people that might. So, you know, there's an impulse to use it, but then you might get exactly the sort of updates that you often see, saying, yeah, we've rejected this candidate because we think this, that, and the other, and we don't know. So clarity of communication, maybe that's a good enough reason to solve that argument. Any thoughts to add on that? Dan, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think if you compare it to from an early careers perspective, students as they come through that education system are very well versed on all things plagiarism. So they know where they stand, they know what they can and can't do. And I think when it transfers into kind of applying for jobs and being in assessment processes, it's obviously not at a mature stage at the moment. And we've got to also remember the influencer network around those candidates who are currently students, that careers leaders, teachers, parents, advisors, you know, they all need that guidance as well. So if employers are not currently providing that, it's going to get very, very murky. So I think employers really do need to kind of take a stance quite soon. And I think to just tie in with that, in this kind of new moral age that we're embarking on, that Gen Z and incoming Gen A want that clarity, they want that authenticity, they want that transparency, as you mentioned. And there really is kind of nowhere to hide now. And I think if we are expecting early talent to come through and be resilient and adaptable and agile as we move into kind of things like job mobility and multiple careers, I think we also need to set the tone or example on the employer side to say, this is how we're adapting to AI, because we can't expect them to be adaptable if we're not showing adaptability ourselves.
Yeah, I totally echo that, Dan. I mean, and in fact, that was like top of my list of things is flexible, active, responsive, because we can't, it's all very well saying to a client, you need a policy on AI, but actually, we know everybody is moving so fast on this, and it's actually really difficult to come out with a really exact policy. So one of the things that we're encouraging people is to respond. Do not, you know, no action is not good, but respond in a way that is a conversation with candidates. I mean, interestingly, I dropped my shortly to be 17-year-old at college this morning, and I said to him, you know, he's doing maths and physics, do you use ChatGPT? And he said no, and I believe him. And do they encourage you to do it at college? No. So it's, you know, it's very mixed out there still, and so we cannot make blanket assumptions about how candidates, and especially in early careers, are going to use it, because it's different for different social economic groups, it's different for different subjects. So what we've got to be, and one of the big things for me is, I'm saying to clients, and you said it, Hung, at the beginning, is get input from wherever you can on this. Read what goes to webinars, steal ideas from people. This is the time to be doing that. And I think that's and speak to experts, because we're all trying to be experts in a subject that not all of us completely understand. So I think collective responses are really important here. But yeah, it's exciting times.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I was just on that point around the example you used there, Claudia. Hot off the press, but some research that's coming out through Sybil, part of Group GTI, to 65,000 students, is actually showing that 37% of that population and sample size are not planning to use AI in the recruitment process. Now, I found that to be quite high. I thought that would be much lower, i.e. there would be a bigger adoption, and that might be different between different socioeconomic groups and diverse communities, etc. But that might be because there's apprehension because of the lack of guidance. They don't know whether to do it because it feels perhaps a little bit taboo, or a bit, they haven't got confidence in using it because they don't know whether they're going to get penalized for it, because there is no guidance and stance. So that's just giving you a view of the population group from a student point of view.
Yeah, and a lot of it is how that is phrased. You know, sometimes how you frame the question can kind of make a false connotation. You know, and there's a feeling that you don't want to admit to something which we currently don't know whether it's okay or not okay. So the message I'm getting from this is that you've got to just be clear and take leadership of the situation. Don't have the candidates try and figure it out. That's actually bad candidate experience, by the way. So if you care about sort of improving CX, give clarity on it, even if it is a no. If that's your position, that's fine. But be clear on it. And I think you'll get sort of your reward. You'll get a natural sorting even. You know, you'll get people say, you know what, I'm impressed by this company that said no. You're like, other people say, I don't want to work for a company that says no. But either way, you're going to get a decent fit, like a self-select in or out. So hopefully that improves your pipeline. But at the same time, you're improving your CX as well. Do we have any live examples of any organization that has actually implemented such things? I mean, where are we? We're talking about, yes, we should do this, but have there been any early adopters that have said, yeah, we've actually got a policy, here it is, and they've rolled it out?
I have one client, and I won't say the brand, but global FMCG client who has their own generative AI sort of walled. I don't know what the technical word for it is, but essentially they're not using OpenAI. They've got their own generative AI function that they use as an organization, which is interesting. So their policy, their published policy is around some elements of the assessment is that it's acceptable. So for instance, we've had some panic in one of the regions around sort of fairly obvious use of generative AI to answer video interview questions. And originally that region was taking the view that really they wanted to discount those candidates that they view to be cheating. And actually the statement was very clear from the group, which was that is not cheating. The way we have it currently set up, you've got a structured framework for assessing these video interviews. You stick to that, because until we tell you otherwise, those people have used whatever available resource to do well at that stage of the selection and assessment. So actually they have been quite assertive in saying it's acceptable to us at the moment, and we will not condone you ignoring candidates who appear to have been using it, apart from the fact it can't really be proved, and would be not a legitimate action, really, probably not very defensible. We've seen that. Now, that is quite isolated, I would say. I haven't got a lot of examples of very clear statements, and we've got quite a lot of clients. Dan, you might have more.
There isn't an abundance, no, but one interesting conversation in recent weeks with quite a sizable technology global firm was how they have kind of almost internally gone on a journey of detection to almost now enablement, and now thinking about how do we assess these AI skills in our process, because they themselves are a huge digital and technology firm, and they are conscious that if their process does not match effectively their customer experience, then it's going to damage their candidate experience. And if they're trying to attract the best digital oriented talent, they want to make sure effectively their storeroom marries up with their shop window, I think. And so I think even for those non-digital type firms, they want to be seen as almost innovative, or just dare I say it, down with the kids and Gen Z and Gen A to come through. Their process is going to need to marry up with what they're going to be dealing with in the role. If we want them to have these AI skills either in the job descriptions as responsibilities, or that they'll be taught these as part of their development programs, I think the process should, where possible, mirror that, and maybe not just detect, but actually embrace, and if not, assess STEM skills.
This is a very good point. I mean, we know that employer demand for AI skills is at an all-time high. I think LinkedIn published something about, where artificial intelligence appeared in job descriptions on their platform, and it's going up like not even a hockey curve. It's almost like a vertical line. So obviously, employers demand AI, but then it's incongruous if you're trying to stop candidates from using AI. I mean, there's got to be some congruity there with regards to this. So that leads me to think that those companies will be trying to do a redesign, because you want to sort of open the door, so to say, but it does challenge certain things that previously you might have lent on that you can no longer really trust overly much. So as a classic example, an application form, I think, is still pretty common for early entry recruitment in particular, probably less so for experience, but just use that as an example. But it's probably the most vulnerable a part of a recruitment process now, because can you trust the information? Is it even valuable? I would argue it probably is not valuable at all, because that's a cut and paste into ChatGPT, produce the answer, paste it back, and you know, what are you dealing with there? You're dealing with kind of polluting information into your recruiting process. You probably want to get rid of the application form. So it does mean redesign. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, so I think you make a great point on the redesign, and I'll come to that in a second. But you know, just as an example, back to the earlier point on, you know, what message do you give out on this? Shoesmiths came out. You never would have thought a law firm, you know, would be leading the way on this, but I'm just going to read out the statement that they made last week on this, which I think is incredibly pertinent. So Shoesmith, a forward-thinking law firm, interesting, you know, to say that afterwards, welcomes the responsible use of AI to enhance your application, not replace your unique voice. So there's a couple of things in there. And then in this blog, so they then go on further to that, we'll explore how you can use AI as a tool, not a shortcut. So that leads very much into your redesign point on this, Hung, that you've got A, making a statement, but B, then saying, right, we're going to give you some guidance now as to how you should be using AI in our process. And we have thought through redesigning our process to enable you to be using Gen AI tools as part of this. So I think that's a, you know, really interesting example of how an employer, and we don't have many examples of it. I mean, I think last time I did some research, I could only find less than a handful of companies that had made a statement like that and then followed it up with a blog as well to provide some proper guidance.
Well, on that, I mean, that's welcome news, I think, to people listening, isn't it? Because it means that we're very, very early. We're all exploring this together. So if you've not got anything in place at this point, don't worry. The fact that you're tuning into this webinar probably already makes you ahead of the curve, so to say. But it's important, I think, to put some thoughts in there. You might have seen that wonderful table, by the way, that on one of the slides that Robert posted earlier. I think that's a really good tool to try and use. I mean, there's debates as to whether the positioning of some of those assessments actually is in the right place, or the right color scheme, should we say. And that's all well and good. It's up to you as a business to decide which you trust more than others. But I think it's useful to understand, as a framework, to think, okay, how do we plot our assessment on this map here? And are you leaning on a lot of stuff which is highly exposed to AI, in which case, you know, you need to think about how that impacts your communication, your quality control, your candidate experience, and what have you. So yeah, very useful. Okay. By the way, we've got some really good questions. I'm going to dive into a diversity one straight away. But if you do have questions for our panelists, just use the comment feature on LinkedIn. Put them in there and we'll get to them towards the end of the show. But I want to deal with this one first because I'm actually going to lead on to the diversity question anyway. It marries quite well. So the question is there any research that looks at the impact on diversity from an age perspective? So just to translate this into crude terms, I'm assuming that this means younger people are going to be more comfortable with AI, and you know, how is there an ageism angle to this? Because maybe people who are older are coming across AI first time and not kind of familiar with it and so forth. I guess, what is our position on that? I mean, there's two ways we can look. Anybody want have any thoughts on the angle on diversity with regards to age?
Well, I haven't seen necessarily any research on the age piece specifically, but I think the diversity point is an important one. I did see some research a couple of weeks back. It was posted on an Institute of Student Employers blog that men were more happier or happier to declare that they'd used AI as part of their job application process than women, and quite a significant difference on that. So nearly 60% of men saying, you know, are you comfortable to declare that you used AI as part of your application process? 43% of women. So I think there is a diversity piece on this that has to be thought through. The age one is always going to be an interesting one when we've got new technology that is coming out, because we know that the next generation are going to be much faster to experiment and play to understand it. Which again comes back to guidance and explaining to people, maybe even pointing them to resources as to where you can get Gen AI support if you don't happen to be a big TikTok user.
You know, I'm surprised at the gender split there. And again, one of the things that we'll discover is that we'll find variants of this type. It's just very new. Like, what is even the theory as to why men would report usage of Gen AI, whereas women will not? I mean, it could even be down to usage. We're talking about reporting. It may well be that men use Gen AI more than women. I mean, has anyone done research on that? We don't know.
No.
So,
and I'd say that was the issue, is that for every stat that I read another one that says something different. So at the moment, I don't think, I mean, I'm not in academia, but we do try to use research in our work, and I'm not finding that much research exactly on this subject about the effect on diversity of AI usage in selection and assessment specifically. I hope we'll do the round of the conferences this year, and maybe there is more work out there than I think there is, but I think there's a lag, and that's the problem with that, is that we are doing the best we can with limited data. Sometimes one of the opportunities we have with automation and AI is to collect data, and we should be using that data to make informed decisions. So I think what this does, we are now, you know, we need good data on this, not just supposition. In the meantime, diversity has always been hugely complex. I think we've just got to be more focused on it, because it's another layer of complexity. So we've got the whole social mobility piece around the subscriptions. We've got countries where generative AI is not in use. So if you've got international recruitment, and Dan, I'm sure you see this, there will be, it's all very, you know, I'm currently working with a client to do a consistent approach to assessment globally. We'd love to integrate ChatGPT or generative AI into the process and call it out as something that we want to see in people, but there's whole markets where they can't use it. So there are some very big ticket diversity issues, international issues. There are social mobility issues that we don't have enough data on yet, if I'm really honest.
And you know what? I think what's important, I'm going to throw out, you might criticize me for this, Claudia, but I'm going to say, because of this paucity of data, and it's very new, we're not going to criticize anyone on this, but I would recommend employers just carry out your own sort of research.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
Don't rely on what we're saying. Go and like survey people coming through. If you've got some kind of candidate feedback form, maybe you should pop a few questions in there. Say, look,
Definitely.
did you use, you know, after the application's gone in or before, you know, get some sentiment data in there so you can get a gauge. Because I think you'd find that every company probably has a slightly different audience in as well, and you might in fact get different results. But yes, very, very interesting. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the candidate experience, and you know the you know, how we factor in what candidates think before we kind of implement any design changes. Dan, I'm going to go to you with this. Have you got any thoughts on this? Like, how do we understand, without, you know, making these grotesque over assumptions, that candidates want this? How do we design a process that actually works for our business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's what I was going to discuss was around the considerations, because like you say, these are going to be quite significant changes to their experiences with the brand, with people, and you don't want to put them off forever, right? Because they might be good for your experienced hire, recruitment in the future. I think given the privilege that I have across educator, employer, and the student spaces, we've got quite a lot of bits of data research and also peers who have kindly sort of supported with some of this. And I think someone talked about sort of trust and transparency earlier, and one interesting thing to touch on the previous point slightly about age was that there was a report in January from Salesforce actually, which showed that 52% of Gen Z talent trust interactions they have with generative AI. And that's quite high when you compare that to perhaps brands themselves, which is obviously quite low, and then people, which is generally the highest. Also, I think the other consideration is around that students are kind of caught in the middle of all of this. Like I said earlier, they are reliant on information that they're either self-seeking or they're being instructed or provided by those parents, teachers, advisors, employers, TikTok, etc. And I think what we're hearing and seeing is that they are concerned that they are the cohort that are actually missing out on developing these AI skills, because we're trying to work out whether we should be enabling them, assessing them, allowing them into university curriculums, using them in schools, etc. And my personal view is that if we were to continue to, let's say, dilly-dally around this, we might actually hold them back when employers really need them to have these skills. So I think the quicker we get to a position, hopefully across sectors and markets, where it becomes the norm, that there is a stance and there is a process, it would definitely not deter their progress.
Do you see any universal elements of a process, Dan, or do you think it's going to be pretty idiosyncratic according to company culture, domain, and what have you? Or do you think actually there's some core elements that should go into every process?
I'm kind of keeping a close eye on those sort of auditing. Interesting you mentioned about Shoesmith earlier. I saw that as well, Robert, and those more regulatory firms who are probably overly cautious on how they introduce this. I think the other end of the spectrum will probably be those kind of tech firms who have got a brand and customer experience element to their decision making, and then there's going to be probably the majority sat in the middle that are probably wait until it becomes one of their industry competitor peers for talent, be it maybe one of the big four encourages the other one of the big four to follow, and I think that will probably snowball, and maybe we'll all be able to kind of share what a best practices could be. It still feels quite immature, but that's what I sense. There'll be sort of two ends of the spectrum, a big majority in the middle, and then they might sort of gravitate to one or the other.
Very, very interesting. Moving on to the next big question we're going to talk about is, we're talking a lot about AI, we're talking a lot about technology, but recruitment, I think one of the hoary cliches, which is probably true, is that recruitment remains a very human experience. I mean, when people have bad candidate experience, it's often because we haven't actually respected the basic human exchanges that we would normally expect in normal society. So how do we maintain the human touch whilst we embrace the technology? Let's assume, Claudia, I'm going to you with this. Let's assume we're going to go down the road of, yes, we're going to implement and design for and embrace AI-enabled candidates. How do we make sure that actually we still maintain that human thread throughout that process?
Yeah, it's a really interesting position. I mean, I've been sort of in the BPS and the Division of Occupational Psychologists for years, and standardization and structure has been the main way to get fairness, right? So, but with that can become quite robotic now. So automation, has obviously been great. It was great in the pandemic. It enabled us to do really structured assessment and in a really rigorous way as well. What I think we are finding now is that we tipped the balance even before generative AI too much towards automation. We wanted to get it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and faster and faster and faster. And in some respects might be controversial. There's the danger of a race to the bottom, really, in terms of actually candidate experience. What we see now, for instance, I think I've read a stat the other day that the average early careers candidate applies for 10 plus programs. So it's become a machine. So we had already started on the idea that we needed to make it less like that. So individual clients, we look for differentiators, we look for the way we brand. The vendors that we work with are great at branding, at putting up sort of the engagement materials into their platforms to really make it feel more human. The interview questions, and one of the problems with a competency-based interview is that it's very robotic. We've been doing it for 20 years. Everybody knows the anatomy of a competency-based interview question. It feels very impersonal. So we're doing more stuff around training up hiring managers to have structured conversations that feel meaningful. We are thinking about using automation where it matters, so very high volumes at the beginning of a stage, and then very quickly using technology to have one-to-one interactions, even if it's a 10-minute catch-up with a recruiter, or a chatbot in some instances has worked well, but something that feels human to keep people in process. For experienced hire, it's even more important. And one of the things, I see there was a question about final interview co-pilots, AI co-pilots, and it's an interesting one. We are becoming, as purists, more comfortable with the human element coming back into assessment and selection, because it doesn't feel right for the population anymore to have this incredibly impersonal, robotic approach to it. So that's probably quite an emotional reaction rather than a professional reaction, but that's definitely what we're seeing.
Well, I think there's elements where the human needs to come in the same way we're thinking about where the robot needs to come in.
Yeah.
We should also think about how human beings need to intercede as the candidate flows through the experience. There has been some really interesting experiments where there's been a completely zero human experience. I think Amazon did that with some of their warehousing workers, where there was a very much like an Amazon Go experience, just like you go straight in, you just log in, and is a zero human, and there's your contract. Maybe for certain jobs that's okay.
For some markets, yeah, the hourly, there are some markets, talent markets, where of course it makes sense, but where you've got fine to hire, expensive talent, hard to find talent, where you've got competition, this is not enough, so.
Well, maybe that's the first measure, Claudia. It's like, okay, what is the talent environment that you're actually recruiting into? And if it is high volume, low entry or whatever it might be, then perhaps you can go heavy on the automation and the AI. If it is more targeted, if it is more, more of a competition for talent, you need to think carefully about where to insert a human being in that flow. And also direction of the contact, like how did you contact the person? Did they come to you via an advert, or did you go and headhunt them? I think that completely changes where you kind of shuffle in the automation and the human side, because if you're sitting there and you're a passive talent, so to say, you've been headhunted by a company, probably you wouldn't welcome, hey, go and have a chat with the chatbot straight away. We have to understand the human psychology of all of this. Okay, we have to crack on because time is pressing. Robert, I want to go to you with this. Candidate enablement, let's say that's happening. We know it's happening, and it will increasingly happen. So one of the issues is the mass adoption and the prolific nature of the use of artificial intelligence. That will happen even if we didn't want it to. I mean, you're looking at people like Microsoft, Google, they're rolling AI out into us. So I think pretty soon you're going to struggle to avoid AI, even if you're using normal tools. So in which case, okay, how does that change how we assess the candidate? Because there is a legitimate case to say, are we just hiring for the output? In which case, we don't really care about the human being. The human being is simply a vehicle for the AI output. Or do we actually care about the human being? And the AI output is actually obfuscating our ability to understand what the human being is. So how do we assess the human? What techniques make sense here?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Hung. And for me, generative AI throws up two things. It's what we want to measure in the future, as well as how we want to measure it. And we've got to answer that question about what we want to measure first, because then we design a process about how we want to measure it. And you raise a great point there, that if people are going into organizations now where generative AI is going to be like a calculator, as a computer, it's going to be available to everybody to help them enhance the way that they do work, then what we're going to value from the work that they do is going to be different going forward from what we did in the past. So things, and a lot of our education actually was governed around that, but things like how you process information, how you present it, these are things that generative AI is just going to be able to do better than a human. So what we're going to want from the GenAI-enabled knowledge worker in the future is much more about human skills around creativity, critical problem solving, how they work with colleagues to bring about, different perspectives and ways of finding routes forward. So these, and Josh Bursin, I think, has been very interesting about this too. He talks about success is going to be based on ambition, learning agility, culture fit, alignment with purpose. And so for me, that's how we then have to start thinking about, okay, what do we want to assess for now in our recruitment and selection process? Because when somebody comes in, we're going to give them the skills. And so my final analogy that we use at Arctic Shores a lot around this is that in the past, we've been very much, if you think of a tree and leaves being the skills that people have, and then the trunk being their experience that then, drives, how well they're able to, build their leaves, and then roots being what underpins the whole success of that tree. And so our view is that you need to be looking at what we call skills enablers, the roots that underpin people, and then their leaves will be things that they acquire. And actually, I saw somewhere that a skill now has a lifespan of 3 years, so you'll be shedding your leaves fairly quickly, and then it comes back to, okay, so we don't want to be assessing for leaves, we want to be assessing for roots.
That's a wonderful analogy, Robert. And I do think the leaf example is exactly right. You will shed the leaf, because the skills, people watching today, the skills that you thought were necessary 2 years ago in your job that you haven't used in a long time, because technology's moved on, markets moved on, your jobs moved on. We need to get to the idea that actually skills get cycled in and out according to the requirements of the time. And the thing that we are looking to recruit for is not necessarily those skills, but it's actually the core competencies that would enable skills acquisition and skills development. Again, maybe it's a kind of a meta skill to be able to train for that, but let's not get too deep into it at this stage. But that is the thing that we need to try and examine. Quick one on this though: how do we test for that? Because is that still an interview? Is that still a human being eyeballing another human being and just trying to get a feeling for whether this person has that capacity, or are there other techniques of assessment that we really need to come to the fore if we're doing that root if we're looking at the root rather than the leaves?
Well, exactly. And I think if we're going to, and I'm sure Claudia will, as the sort of chartered occupational psychologist on the call, will have a perspective on this too. But I think there are good tools out there. Obviously, Arctic Shores is one of them that enables you to understand what somebody's learning agility is, what their creativity is, what their resilience is, what their critical problems solving skills are. And then for me, the value of the interview is where we dig out somebody's motivations and values and alignment with purpose. And that's what we should be doing at the interview, and use the tools to find out, have they got some of those core skills enablers? And I think, doing it through tasks and the way that people do things is ultimately going to be better than asking them questions about that. But you use the interview stage as the one to really bring out how that person is going to add value in a GenAI workplace once they get into the organization.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, we've got to keep moving on, folks. We've got 10 minutes left. If you have any questions for our crowd, for our panelists, please use the comment thread on LinkedIn. We've already got a bunch of these questions we're going to go to in a minute. So this is your last chance, folks, to ask this wonderful panel what they're thinking. Okay, let's just skip straight to predictions of usage, and both from the candidate perspective and using GenAI, but also how we anticipate companies to respond over the next 12 months. Where do you see all this happening? Let's go do a quick round robin. Claudia, let's go to you. Candidate usage of GenAI. How do you see it using? I mean, I guess it's all going to increase, but in what way? Are there any particular tools? And how do you think employers will respond over the next 12 months?
So we're having to be quite nimble. We are currently working on sort of probably 2 or 3 projects which look directly at changing assessment practices to cope with this. So we are seeing it used for digital interview, but we have vendors are responding well. We are pushing them hard. So, you know, we do want to, so that will be a big change. Vendors, keep an eye on your vendors. Do not assume that the last time you spoke to them, which may have been 6 to 8 months ago, they haven't done anything about it. Most vendors, most decent vendors, are constantly looking at ways in which they can adjust their assessments. So I say usage is going to increase, but the vendor's ability to respond to that will also go in step with that. Plus design, we've got to change the way we design. So we're using rotating questions, questions that would be more difficult just to transact with in a ChatGPT way. We saw, you know, so, and we're also putting comms around it to kind of mitigate. The big concern for us is that tests that used to differentiate between high and low performers will stop working. So what we're going to get is everybody passing them. So we can't use them for screening. So we are constantly looking at data at the moment to work out whether tests that used to perform quite well are now not differentiating. And that is both a waste of money. It's also not it's then undermining the objectivity or the fairness of your decisions at screening. So that's one of our biggest areas to look at is trying to get candidate usage down or change the testing in screening at the moment.
That's actually been verified, by the way, folks, as well. I think there's a number of research sort of papers that have come out over the last 6 months, which studied they did an A/B test basically on workers using AI and not using AI, and they discovered that actually the way AI had the most significant value add was in the low skill, low competence, low experience workers. They were able to get to a higher competency level using AI, and that makes total sense. Have a think about language skills, for instance. You don't speak French. Guess what? If there was a French test, you're going to fail it. But if you can use ChatGPT, you'd probably ace that because it will bridge the gap. If you're a fluent French speaker, ChatGPT is not going to help you that much. You've already got it covered. So it's very important challenge to test that use the in and out screening. Probably we're going to have to rethink what that looks like. Okay, Dan, go to you real quick. What's your prediction for how employers are going to react to the ever increasing use of of generative AI?
I think I touched on a little bit earlier in terms of the segmentation of employers and where they sit and where they may move to. I think just a couple of things for them to be aware of is that just because this is relatively new to all of us, students are using this. If you look at the progress that's been made in the Russell Group universities from July last year, they've all congregated together to look at building out how as institutions their course level work and their examinations can be using AI from an ethical and responsible point of view. And I think you might have seen OpenAI and University of Arizona in America have also have an alliance now, the first of its kind, which is to bring GenAI tech into institutional processes with an OpenAI challenge. So it's actually incorporating AI into, I guess, experiential learning and competitions and things like that. So I think there'll be more of this. I think employers can really take a lead for themselves to showcase that they are embracing AI, but in a ethical and positive way.
Yeah, so it's almost like, why don't you go even a step further and say, we are going to assess with AI, we're going to use these tools, come and this is our assessment, and then people will, the ambiguity disappears because actually we're going to be testing for this. Really good example, worth keeping an eye on. Okay, we're going to go to questions because we're running out of time. I want to blast through these. Okay, the first one. Where are most people worried about candidates using AI? Where in the process do you think it's most at risk? Robert, I'm going to just select you to answer this because we can't go around Robin. Where do you think is the greatest vulnerability in the recruiting process?
Well, we've obviously produced some research around some of the traditional tools on this. Claudia alluded to that, to anything that is language-based in an application process that requires you to either digest a piece of text or to create a piece of text is highly vulnerable. It's as simple as that. Large language models are exactly that. They are designed to interpret text and give you a predictive outcome. And when you see how clever the different chat GPT prompting styles are, I think a lot of people don't even realize that there are different prompting styles there. A lot of what we think is immune to chat GPT influence, particularly now that it has a visual element to interpret as well. It's a lot more sophisticated than many people realize. So I actually think all parts of the process need to be very carefully looked at and thought through.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, let's go to a question I think we touched on, we didn't really answer. What are our thoughts on having an interview, so an AI interview co-pilot, a final stage interview? So I'm imagining this may be a future scenario, final stage interview, candidates flown through the process, but I want to record this, I guess. I want to have co-pilot kind of pick up issues during the interview, maybe prompt questions and so on. Is this like okay? Is this generally something we can envisage happening? Is it controversial anyway? Thoughts on that, Claudia? Let's go to you. Sorry, we were not able to get everyone on that.
I don't have a really informed answer to this, other than it sounds horrible, but I guess that is my reaction. It's yeah, I'm sure there are ways that it could be justified, and I'd need to look into it a bit more, how it works and what the case for it is. But on my instinct is okay, we are really just starting to assess people's ability to prompt ChatGPT, and that can't be the only thing we're interested in, and it really isn't, and that we've got to go beyond that. So I worry about that, because there's more to humans at work than that. But that's probably a really old-fashioned, stuck, middle-aged response, late middle-aged response.
but sometimes, Claudia, they're the best ones, aren't they? The instant reactions are actually very important, because this is what we can expect the candidate to experience. We're all working through this, so I think there's a lot of value in understanding there's a kind of a visceral reaction against the idea that this is there. Okay, we're going to move quickly on. How about this? We've got a question here on how do we start integrating candidate guidance on the use of AI into our recruiting process? I guess we should read the guide, right? I mean, is that right? I mean, not to say it's a solution, but that gives you something to start with. And obviously source of the information elsewhere. Pipe the guide into ChatGPT and ask for recommendations. I don't know. But basically, the companies are starting to produce tooling on this, which is going to help us get there. Okay, so another question here. We're going to batter through this. I think we're going to do the last two. Doctors suggest that patients find AI more empathetic. Surely, many of the current recruitment experience problems have humans as root cause. Will AI not enhance it? That's a very, I think it's a kind of a loaded question, maybe not, maybe a rhetorical one, but perhaps we need to recognize that human-only recruitment has actually been profoundly dissatisfactory, given the fact that recruitment is generally an unwelcome and unpleasant experience for anybody who's had to look for a job. So AI, maybe we need to have a very positive and embracing attitude to it. Okay, I don't think
I think maybe says more about doctors' empathy than it does about AI's empathy. But
that's true. Doctors aren't hired for their bedside manner. Okay, final question. Is the elephant in the room here not face-to-face meetings? Obviously, there's been much. There has to be some screening, but AI perhaps much less useful at interview stage. So I guess the question is, we're not going to hire anybody without face-to-face. So presumably AI doesn't take place in that context. What's our thoughts generally on the use of AI in a face-to-face interview?
Well, my worry is that it starts a bit, you know, Claudia, I think I'm with you on this, on the sort of the AI co-pilot on this. Where I worry at the moment is that you've got a lot of people going out there saying, oh, we've got the skills based organization, and quite rightly, they're looking at what skills they have in the organization and what skills they're going to need going forward. And then the tech response to that is, oh, great, well, we'll use AI now to go and help create a match for you in all sorts of different ways, whether it's going out and finding people who've got those skills, words, in whatever way that they've come up with them on their LinkedIn profile, or if they put it in the application form, or even if they use it in the interview. And suddenly now we're using words to match people that we haven't really done enough research on as to whether that is a great way of understanding that this person is going to be the best fit for you. So it is a bit of the elephant in the room on this, that lots of people are running around saying AI is going to be a silver bullet for this, it's going to be a silver bullet for that. But as those of us in, you know, the occupational psychology world know, correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. And I think that what Claudia alluded to earlier on this, the predictability, the fairness around this has to stay at the forefront of our minds before we adopt some of these AI ideas that are being thrown around.
Oh yes, sorry guys. We have to come to the end of this conversation. I'm really sorry. By the way, there's not one elephant in the room here. I think there's a whole herd of elephants, really. But we're just trying to get, you know, corral them as best we can and start examining it because we can't ignore it. We've come to the end of our conversation. So thank you to our wonderful panel, Claudia Nuckins, Dan Doherty, and Robert Newry. Thank you to our sponsors, Arctic Shores, for putting this on. They've invested money and effort into research and production of tooling. Make sure you do download those 2 documents that I think could get you started on having an internal conversation on how you manage the candidate, sort of AI-enabled candidates. Okay, that's about it, everyone. Hope you've enjoyed it. We're going to keep doing these conversations, so we'll see you the next time we come and have this dialogue. Thank you very much for watching.